Usually when we meet someone for the first time, there's this standard social ritual we all
Oh,
do.
yeah, like going to a conference or a party.
Exactly. You go to this event, and you get handed one of those little white stickers with the red border.
Right, the ones that say, hello, my name is on them.
Yeah, and you just, scribble your name in Sharpie. It's neat, it's quick, and honestly, it's entirely superficial.
It really is. I mean, it tells you what to call someone, but it tells you absolutely nothing about who they actually are.
Right. But when you look at ancient literature, specifically the ancient biblical text that, hello, my name is not a sticker, gets thrown completely out the window.
Completely. Because back then, names weren't just labels.
They were hard-won revelations. And that's what we're looking at today. For you listening, we are pulling apart a fascinating theological concept called the law of first mention.
It's such an incredible concept to dig into.
It really is. We want to see how the various names of God are revealed in these foundational texts. The mission here is to uncover the stories behind these names, understand why they were given, and see how that first mention sets a precedent for how the name is used in prayer today.
And we've got a great stack of sources for this.
We do. We are pairing a curated reference guide on the names of God with the primary texts themselves. So excerpts from Genesis, Exodus, 1 Samuel, Psalms, and Ezekiel. We're going to uncover how these titles were forged in these really intense crucibles of human experience.
Yeah, it's definitely not just a list of vocabulary words.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I think we have to start with the mechanics of ancient Semitic languages, right? The way they treated names is just fundamentally different from how we do today.
It is, yeah. In the ancient Near East, a name was not just a phonetic identifier to, get someone's attention across a crowded room.
Like yelling, "Hey, John!"
Exactly. A name contained the essence, the character, and even the ultimate destiny of the person. To know someone's name was to have direct insight into their fundamental nature.
Wow, so it was deeply tied to identity.
Completely. And that brings us to the law of first mention. It essentially suggests that the very first time a concept or a name is used in Scripture, it establishes a foundational precedent.
Like a baseline.
Right, a baseline that remains consistent throughout the rest of the text. The very first mention sets the trajectory for everything that follows.
Which means we have to start at the absolute beginning, right? The very first page.
Genesis 1.1.
Yeah. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. The name used there in the original Hebrew is Elohim.
Elohim. And if you look at our reference guides, it translates this directly to Creator God, which is still used today for worship and acknowledging creation.
Right. And you have to look at the sheer scale of this first mention.
Oh, the scale is massive. The text describes the earth as empty and unoccupied, with darkness over the abyss. And then Elohim speaks.
Let there be light.
Exactly. The firmament is divided, dry land appears. I mean, it is a display of absolute unrivaled power over the elements.
It really establishes the baseline for all of history, like you said.
It does. And what's interesting is that Elohim isn't, negotiating with pre-existing matter.
Right, or battling other cosmic forces to build the world.
Yeah, which was actually a very common theme in competing Babylonian or Egyptian creation myths. But Elohim operates with total sovereign independence.
So we have this massive cosmic scale. But then, it's like using a camera zoom lens.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah. We start with the widest possible shot of the cosmos, with Elohim, and then we immediately zoom in on this gritty, localized human battlefield in Genesis chapter 14.
Right, to meet Elyon.
Exactly. So Abram, who later becomes Abraham, has just won this brutal military campaign. 4 rival kings had taken his nephew, Lot, captive.
Led by Chedorlaomer, yeah.
Right. So Abram takes 318 of his own men, chases them down, defeats them, and rescues Lot. And as he's coming back from this bloodbath, he's met by Melchizedek.
Melchizedek, the king of Salem, who is also a priest.
Yeah, and he brings out bread and wine, and he blesses Abram using a brand new name. He says, "Blessed be Abram by the Most High God who created heaven and earth."
And the Hebrew name he uses there is El Elyon, the Most High God. Our reference guide notes that this specific name is invoked today for protection and victory.
Okay, but wait, hold on. If God is establishing this ultimate universal authority as Elohim, why introduce a new name so soon?
That's a fair question.
I mean, doesn't that risk confusing Abram? Because in the ancient Near East, surrounding cultures had these massive pantheons, right? Different gods for different functions.
Right, a god for rain, a god for war.
Exactly. So by rolling out name after name, doesn't it look like the text is just adopting a polytheistic mindset, just giving Abram a different deity for the battlefield?
Well, it looks that way to a modern reader, sure. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the law of first mention shows us that before God steps into personal trauma, he first establishes himself as the ultimate creator and protector.
So he's tying them together.
Exactly. Melchizedek intentionally links the two concepts in his blessing. He says, the Most High God who created heaven and earth, he is bridging the gap.
Ah, I see.
The author is ensuring that Abram understands that the cosmic architect who shaped the galaxies, Elohim, is the exact same authority presiding over these violent geopolitical conflicts on the ground.
Oh, wow. So Ilion proves that God isn't just some abstract watchmaker who wound up the universe and walked away.
Right. He is supreme over human kings and historical events.
That makes a lot of sense. But external battles are one thing. You can track troop movements, you can see the enemy. But what happens when the conflict is internal?
When it's personal.
Yeah, deeply personal, deeply traumatic. That leads to the next set of names. We move to Genesis 16, and the scope narrows from a battlefield to a single broken family.
And this is where we meet Hagar.
Yes, Hagar. She's an Egyptian handmaid to Sarai, Abram's wife.
And because Sarai cannot conceive, she forces Hagar to sleep with Abram to provide an heir.
Which, it's a harsh, culturally accepted practice of the time, but the human fallout is just catastrophic.
It really is. Tension erupts in the household, and Sarai mistreats Hagar so severely that Hagar actually flees.
Let's just picture the reality of this for a second. Hagar is a pregnant, marginalized servant fleeing into the ancient wilderness.
It's completely unforgiving out there.
There is no infrastructure. She has no water, no status, no power. Biologically, she and her unborn child are facing a death sentence.
But the text says an angel of the Lord meets her by a spring of water.
Yeah, and the angel tells her she's going to have a son named Ishmael, which means God hears. So it acknowledges her affliction.
But then Hagar flips the script. She is a female foreign slave, yet she is the one who gives God a name.
Right. She calls him El Roi.
Which translates to the God who sees me, because she realizes that in her absolute lowest moment of abuse and complete invisibility, she was intimately noticed.
That is powerful. And the reference guide maps El Roi directly to times today when you're feeling unseen.
Yeah, it's a very intimate name.
But, mere presence, just being seen by El Roi well, it isn't always enough to solve a problem.
Right.
Sometimes the laws of physics and biology are actively against you. So how does the text address a situation that isn't just lonely, but physically impossible?
That requires an entirely different kind of revelation, and we see that in the very next chapter, Genesis 17.
Right. Abram is now 99 years old. Sarai is 90.
They've been waiting decades for the child God promised them, and humanly speaking, the window of biological opportunity hasn't just closed.
It was bricked over years ago.
Exactly. Acknowledging their pain isn't enough anymore. They need a complete suspension of the natural order.
So God appears and introduces a new name. He says, I am the Almighty God, El Shaddai.
El Shaddai.
And he changes their names to Abraham and Sarah, establishes a covenant of circumcision, and promises that Sarah will actually physically give birth to Isaac.
And the texts explicitly link the name El Shaddai to situations requiring supernatural intervention.
They're impossible situations.
Right. The first mention happens when all human effort, all biological probability has categorically failed. It sets the precedent that fulfilling the promise relies entirely on the capacity of El Shaddai, not human engineering.
Which sets up this terrifying paradox in Genesis 22.
The sacrifice of Isaac.
Yeah. Abraham is asked to sacrifice this exact miracle child. The child provided by El Shaddai is now demanded as an offering.
It's an agonizing test.
So Abraham takes him up the mountain, blinds him, and literally has the knife raised. But an angel calls out, stops him, and points out a ram caught by its horns in the thorns.
And Abraham sacrifices the ram as a substitute.
Right, and he names the location the Lord sees, or Jehovah-Jireh, the provider, which our guide says is used today for needs and provision.
So we move from the God who intimately sees Hagar's pain to the God of the biologically impossible for Sarah, El Shaddai, to the God who provides a substitutionary rescue for Abraham, Jehovah-Jireh.
Okay, let me push back on this sequence for a second. Here's where it gets really interesting.
All right, go for it.
We have Hagar, a runaway servant, getting El Roi, and we have Abraham, a wealthy patriarch, getting Jehovah-Jireh. Both of them get custom name reveals based entirely on their specific localized traumas.
Right.
So Does the law of first mention imply that God's identity is actually shaped by human need? Like, is his character adapting to whatever the situation requires?
It's a really logical question to ask, but we have to look at the mechanism of revelation here. The text isn't presenting a deity whose core identity changes based on what humans require.
Okay, so how does it work then?
Think of it more like the load-bearing columns in ancient architecture.
Okay.
If you're standing outside a massive temple, you only see the exterior pillars, right? You understand the structure's general strength. But when you are forced inside, into the dark inner rooms, you suddenly rely on the internal support beams.
Oh, I see where you're going.
The building didn't change its shape to accommodate you. Your vulnerable position forced you to discover a different aspect of its foundation.
Wow. So Hagar's invisibility forced her into a position to discover the support of El Roi.
Exactly. And Abraham's lack of a sacrifice forced him to lean on Jehovah Jireh. The desperation doesn't create the attribute, it simply unveils it.
The desperation unveils the attribute. That is a great way to put it. But as we move out of Genesis and into the book of Exodus, the scale of that desperation just explodes.
It really does. We're no longer dealing with the internal politics of one nomadic family.
Right. Fast forward a few centuries, and the family of Abraham has multiplied into a massive nation in Egypt, and they are groaning under the brutality of state-sponsored slavery.
So those intimate family names are no longer sufficient. A massive enslaved nation needs an entirely different kind of revelation to rally behind.
It's a completely different context. Which brings us to Moses in Exodus chapter 3.
Yeah.
He's out pasturing sheep in the desert and sees a bush burning with fire that isn't turning to ash.
The famous burning bush.
Yeah. God speaks from the flame, telling Moses to go to Pharaoh and demand the release of the Israelites.
Yeah.
Moses kind of panics and asks this very practical question. If they ask me, what is his name? What am I supposed to say?
And the answer God gives breaks all the conventional rules of ancient naming conventions.
Yeah. He doesn't offer a title of strength like the conqueror. He simply says, I am WHOAM.
Yahweh.
Yahweh. The guide notes this is used for God's presence and covenant. So what does this all mean? It feels like a massive pivot.
It's a huge pivot.
It's almost like a corporate rebranding for a global launch, moving from a family business to a national enterprise.
What's fascinating here is that Yahweh isn't tied to a specific action like providing or seeing.
Right, it's not a verb of action.
Exactly. I am encompasses all times past, present, and future, giving the new nation an eternal anchor.
Because their entire identity had been dictated by the brutal day-to-day whims of Pharaoh.
Yeah, and suddenly they are given this unshakable anchor. He is the God who inherently eyes right there in the mud and the brickmaking.
And they needed that anchor immediately, because the moment they escape Egypt, they are plunged right back into chaos.
The ambush in Exodus 17.
Yes, the Amalekites attack them in the desert. Joshua has to fight them hand-to-hand with the sword, while Moses stands on a hill.
Right, holding up his staff.
Following the victory, Moses builds an altar and names it Jehovah Nissi, which our source translates as the Lord, my exaltation or my banner. And this name sets the precedent for fighting spiritual battles.
You really have to understand the terrifying reality of Bronze Age warfare to get why Jehovah Nissi is so important.
I mean, it had to be chaos.
Absolute chaos.
Yeah.
There were no radios, no aerial surveillance. An ancient battlefield was just dust, blood, screaming, and blinding confusion.
Right.
Once the lines crashed together, a soldier could easily lose his orientation. The banner, a massive standard hoisted high above the fray, was your only tactical rallying point.
Oh, so if the line was breaking, you look for the banner to know where to stand.
Exactly. It showed you where command was and where the army was holding its ground.
So by naming the altar Jehovah Nissi, Moses is declaring that the physical military tactics aren't what saved them. God himself is the banner preventing the nation from collapsing.
When the dust of trauma blinds you, the banner tells you where to find your footing.
That is so profound. Unfortunately, though, that unified footing deteriorates as the centuries pass.
It does.
Moving into the later texts, the prophets and the Psalms, we watch the Israelites fracture. They divide, face exile, and experience this profound loneliness. And the names revealed in these later texts reflect a people in desperate need of rescue.
We see this really clearly in 1 Samuel chapter 1.
Yeah, we are introduced to a man named Elkanah, and he goes up yearly to sacrifice to the Lord of hosts. In Hebrew, that is Jehovah Sabaoth.
And the term Sabaoth literally refers to massive organized armies, either angelic hosts or the armies of Israel.
Very militaristic.
Intensely militaristic. And the guide maps this name to prayers for direct intervention.
But look at the context of this first mention. It isn't used on a battlefield. It isn't used by a king facing down an invading empire.
No, it's not.
The backdrop of Jehovah Sabaoth is a woman named Hannah Elkanah's wife who is weeping bitterly in the temple because she is barren. Why introduce the ultimate militaristic title in the context of a woman crying over her empty womb?
It highlights a profound theological paradox. The text intentionally juxtaposes the macro power of the universe with micro-human suffering.
Oh, wow.
By having Hannah appeal to the commander of heaven's armies for a child, the text is arguing that God's supreme martial power is not reserved solely for cosmic wars. That immense authority can be mobilized to intervene in the silent domestic agony of a single broken-hearted woman.
We see that same tension between the macro and the micro in the Psalms, actually.
Definitely. Psalm 8.
Yes, Psalm 8 starts with, O Lord, our Lord, how admirable is your name throughout all the earth. The word used here for Lord is Adonai, meaning master or sovereign ruler.
Right, used for total surrender and recognizing God's majesty.
Exactly. David, the author, is looking up at the night sky, and he is completely overwhelmed by the crushing scale of the universe versus human frailty.
He asks, "What is man that you are mindful of him?" It is the realization that the sovereign ruler of the cosmos is intimately mindful of human insignificance.
Which brings us to perhaps the most haunting first mention in our stack of sources, the prophet Ezekiel.
Ezekiel is writing during the psychological devastation of the Babylonian exile.
Right, the Israelites have been dragged away from their homeland, Jerusalem is burned, the temple is annihilated.
And you have to understand the trauma of this moment. In the ancient world, if your temple was destroyed, it meant your God had been defeated.
Oh, so they felt completely abandoned.
They were sitting in Babylon, surrounded by foreign temples, wondering, where is God now? Is he just localized to a pile of rubble back in Jerusalem?
But then at the very end of the book, Ezekiel chapter 48, Ezekiel is given a vision of a restored, divided land and sanctuary.
And the final verse reveals a new name for the city, Jehovah Shammah.
The Lord is there. Our guide says it's used in times of loneliness.
It is a radical revelation of omnipresence. Ezekiel's vision proves that God's presence is not tethered to a building. Even in the aftermath of total destruction, the Lord is there.
You know, when you lay all these historical sources out, you realize this isn't just dry theology. It's literally a spiritual first aid kit.
It really is.
Feeling unseen. You use El Roy. Need intervention. You call on Jehovah Sabaoth.
This raises an important question for you, the listener. Which of these first mentioned stories resonates most with your current situation? Are you needing the suspension of natural laws by El Shaddai? Or maybe the assurance of Jehovah Shammah?
Because the law of first mention proves that these titles were never just arbitrary. They were forged in the very real fires of human experience, from the creation of the cosmos to the heartbreak of exile.
Every single one marks a moment where human limitation collided with divine intervention.
But I want to leave you with one final provocative thought drawn from the reference guide.
Okay, let's hear it.
The guide mentions one last name, found at the very end of the biblical text in the book of Revelation. Alpha and Omega.
The beginning and the end. Used for trusting in all seasons.
Right. Think about the narrative structure here. If Elohim is the very first mention at the dawn of time, and Alpha and Omega is the ultimate culmination, it suggests that all the other names, provider, healer, banner, peace, are simply the middle chapters of a story that is already completely bookended.
The beginning and the ending are fundamentally resolved.
Exactly. So what does it mean for your own life story, your own struggles, if the ending is already written in a name? What does it mean for the chaos you're navigating right now?
It's something to really mull over.
It is. The next time you feel like you're just wearing a superficial, hello, my name is sticker, remember that these ancient names were recorded specifically so you'd know exactly who to call out to. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the sources.
It's been a great exploration.
Keep asking the hard questions, keep digging into the history, and we will catch you next time.